Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm filming in natural lighting, which never happens, but it seems like spring is actually coming, so I'm very excited about that. Today I'm going to talk about the books that I've read in February and March. Quite a few of them I liked. It was not as much of a success as January was, because in January I read 3 5-star books. In February and March, it was kind of a wave of good things, things that I didn't like that much, and terrible things that I DNF'd. So you're going to get a mix, like a healthy mix of books. The first book that I want to talk about is House of Agnes by Fiona Zedde. I gave this one 5 stars. It was almost a 5. I think it's a bit too long. Maybe some things should have been cut a little bit, but I really like this romance. It's an FF romance. It's very mafia-esque, although it's not about mafia. Let's start from the top. It is a story about Agnes, who's an owner of an elite brothel. She inherited it from her father, who was a piece of shit, and decided that she's going to change the way this business is done. Years later, she becomes very successful. She's a workaholic. She spends most of her time at her office, and she spends the time that she has left with her adopted daughter. So love is not really in the picture for her. One day she goes to this exclusive bar that she frequents, and she meets a woman named Lola. Lola is very different from all the other women that are in Agnes's life. Lola stands up for herself. She doesn't let Agnes dominate over her, and Agnes finds Lola very intriguing, but she feels like something is wrong. And she's not wrong, because Lola then asks Agnes if she can work for her as a sex worker. In reality, Lola wants to break into the house of Agnes and ruin it from the inside, because her older stepsister was murdered, and at the autopsy, Lola was given all the objects that Agnes was found with, and one of the objects was a pen with the logo of House of Agnes. So Lola believes that House of Agnes and Agnes herself is at fault. This romance is so entertaining. The plot is really interesting. It's one of those books that you need to pick up if you are in a reading slump, because it just has a perfect balance between tension, romantic tension, and plot. I loved the plot of this book. I was very interested. I also really liked these two characters. I loved how they interacted with each other. I really liked Lola. I think she's my favorite from the two of them. And I think it's just really well done. It was my first Fiona Zedde. Maybe I'm overhyping, maybe her other books are better, but this one was so good. I really liked it. The next book is non-fiction. It's Come As You Are by Nagoski. I gave it 5 stars. I usually don't give ratings to non-fiction books. It is targeted at cisgender women specifically, so I think cisgender women are the ones that are going to get more out of it, but obviously you can read it, whatever gender you are. It just explains a lot about the human body and sexual behavior. I've never read anything as comprehensive and anything as validating. This is a book that is recommended by sex therapists to a lot of couples that have issues with their sex lives. Some incompatibility issues, and I read this one with a specific goal in mind. In the past few years, I was wondering if I'm on the asexual spectrum, and I think asexuality in general is the toughest label, because no one really knows what sexual attraction feels like. No one can really explain it. As I tend to believe now, we all experience it differently, and the thing that we're used to calling sexual attraction is just a fragment of experiences. It's just a small percentage that was popularized by media. So I was wondering if I'm somewhere in the spectrum, and I wanted to read this book to understand other people's experiences with their sexuality, with their response, and this book really helped me. It gave me a lot of tools to work through some issues that I actually have, and I just genuinely highly recommend to pick it up. It's just really good. It also is interestingly trans-inclusive without really trying to be. The basic concept is that we're all actually similar. All our bodies are similar. Sexuality-wise, we technically have all the same parts. They're just arranged differently, which for some reason was such a mind-blowing discovery for me. As I said, I highly recommend this book. I want to change things up a little bit, so I picked up a thriller. It was The Team by Jill Raven, and I've never heard about this book before. I actually just stumbled upon it on Scribd. I think the app recommended this book to me, and I wanted to pick up an author that I've never heard about before, because with thrillers and mysteries, there are kind of 10 authors on Booktube that most people read, and I just wanted to be different. I just didn't want to be like all the other girls. The Team by Jill Raven is a forced proximity thriller. It follows a group of co-workers that are part of a pharma company. They go to this retreat in the middle of winter for a team building weekend. They all know each other since their days in uni. They all started the company together, and there is a lot of unresolved drama between them. The only black sheep in the group is a girl that does finance. She's not a manager. She came to the retreat instead of her manager that got food poisoning. The only perspective that we get is hers, and she's trying to use this retreat as an opportunity to get a raise. But she doesn't really know about all the things that the managers are hiding about the company. It's a very quick thriller with a huge body count. I'm not sure I expected that, but people are dying like flies in this novel. I wouldn't call this novel scary, but it's definitely thrilling. And at a certain point, I didn't know how the plot is going to move. It was more of a survival type of thriller than a horror type of thriller, if you know what I mean. So while they're in the camp fighting about everything, the electricity goes off, and they're left without heat, warm food, and means of communication because the phones don't work in that area. So they're trying to figure out a way how to get help or to get out, and then they realize that someone is watching the camp and they might be in more danger than they expected. I gave this book, I think, initially 4 stars, but then bumped it down to 3. I didn't think it leaves a lasting impression. It's like one of those movies that are good when you're watching it, but then you forget about it in a couple of days and don't remember at all, ever. I didn't really like the last plot twist. To me, it felt expected and also unwarranted. But if you're looking to dip into other thriller and mystery authors, you can pick this one up. You are going to enjoy it. You will just probably not remember much of it after. After January, I was on the hunt for a 5-star read, and I was picking up every single book expecting to love it, but it was just not happening. So I was like, I'm going to go to tried and true. I'm going to pick up something from K.J. Charles, and I picked up Think of England by K.J. Charles. Think of England is the sequel to... what was this book called? Proper English. Wow, the amount of useless information that I keep in my brain is astonishing. So, Proper English, it was an FF historical romance with some mystery elements. I enjoyed it. It was very Agatha Christie-esque. And this one, Think of England, is also a historical romance with mystery elements. I would say that there are more mystery elements in this one, and it's a bit darker than the first book. This one is MM, and it's also forced proximity. It follows a guy named Archie who's ex-military. He lost a few of his fingers and some of his friends to an accident at war. They were shipped some guns and they blew up in their hands. So now he believes that it could have been prevented and this whole ruse was intentional. So he's looking for the person who was at fault, and he visits the house of a man that might. Archie believes that the guns were tampered with, so by pretending to be a guest, he wants to snoop around in the house. In the house, he meets this guy who is very suspicious. He's a dandy, he's a poet, he's Portuguese Jewish, and he seems to Archie that he's out of place there among military men. He then realizes why in the middle of the night when he's snooping around, and he bumps into this guy who's also snooping around. Basically what happens is they're both looking for some dirt, and they decide to band together to do it. This book has twists and turns, things I didn't expect at all. It's a historical romance. Why would I expect a very tense, very twisty plot? It is just like to love in a way, but I would actually argue for a case of opposites attract, because the two leads are very, very different and they don't really understand each other because they come from two different worlds. But I think it's the story's beauty how they are forced to work together and they start to get to know each other and to actually like each other. As I've said, Think of England is much darker than the first book, so expect the unexpected, I guess. I'm not going to spoil much. I'm just going to warn you for a suicide mention, but I love this book so much and I highly recommend it. Then I finally picked up Ace of Spades, which was extremely hyped everywhere, like everywhere, on Booktube, on Goodreads, on TikTok, everywhere. And I hated it. I gave it nothing. Well, I think I gave it 2 stars because I've read like 60% of it and DNF'd, and I felt justified. I needed to give it a rating. Otherwise, I just wasted my time. We're not going to stop for too long with this book. If you want to see my in-depth thoughts, you can just watch my Dark Academia reading vlog. I'm going to link it. I just didn't vibe with this book. I think it's a bit overhyped. And I also think that while a lot of the Dark Academia themes are a part of the story, the book reads like a general young adult thriller, which usually are not good. And I think this book is not very good either. The first part felt very young adult, thriller, basic. The second part was a bit better. It explored darker stuff. Sometimes it felt a little bit like torture porn, but that's something we can argue about. The third part was just bad because it was not properly built up to, in my opinion. It just felt like a sudden turn of the switch because the characters that turned out to be evil became so cartoonish in the third part. To me, this book doesn't have a crossover appeal, so I would not recommend it to adults. Maybe teenagers would get more out of it. I don't know. I was very disappointed, so I picked up something that I knew I'm going to like, and I also didn't like it. It was a real bummer. So I picked up the second book in The Castles Ever After by Tessa Dare. It's Say Yes to the Marquess. I actually thought that Tessa Dare cannot write a book that I'm not going to like, and I gave this one 3 stars, and it was kind of a stretch in my opinion still. I was listening to it on audio, so I was just too lazy sometimes to switch it off when it annoyed me, but I didn't love it, that's for sure. And I actually thought that this book is gonna be my favorite from Tessa Dare, and it wasn't. It was such a bummer. This one is about a heroine who was engaged for a very long time, like a few long years, to a Marquess who left the country for a diplomatic mission. They don't talk much, they don't exchange many letters, he doesn't seem to care about her very much. The engagement was arranged by their families, so she was dutifully expecting him for all these years, and she is fed up with it. She is tired of being teased in this society because he doesn't seem to be wanting to marry her at all. So she finds his brother, and she wants the brother, as an official representative of the family, to break the marriage contract and to set her free. The brother, though, doesn't really want to do it for his personal reasons. We're not going to get into it because who cares? I don't like the book, so I don't care, certainly. The romance is between the heroine and the brother. So I was like, okay, this book has a forbidden flavor, I'm going to enjoy it, there's going to be drama, it's also going to be funny because it's Tessa there. And the only thing about this book that I liked is the funny parts. Everything else I didn't. I also liked the scenario, I guess, but a good premise doesn't make a good book. The relationship between them was fine. They were clearly very attracted to each other. I just wanted to barf every single time the hero was described as extremely manly, beefy, strong, and masculine, etc. He was not called beefy, but he basically was. The reason why I cringed is very specific. It's not because men are not allowed to be strong, etc., because I don't care. It's because the heroine has body issues. Her family actively starved her, so she struggles with her weight. And it's not that he criticized her for her body, he was really into her. The problem with me is how he vocalized this desire. There was underlying message every single time they had some sexy or sexy-ish times. Every single time the message was, or he outright told, that it's not that she's fat, it's that these other guys were not manly enough for her. And would you look at that, I could pick you up easily because I'm the manly man and I can actually pick you up. You're actually so light. And I'm all about people being attracted to what they are attracted to consensually, but the problem with this message, in my opinion, is that he's trying to erase the idea that people come in different packages and we all have different bodies, and there's no need to console her that she's not fat. I just feel like this novel was extremely heteronormative for me, so I could not enjoy it. Usually when there's a mention or a couple that bother me, I can look past them, but when it's force-fed to me constantly, I cannot ignore it. So, didn't like this book. It was such a surprise to me that I didn't like it, especially because I was so confident that I'm going to love it. I had 2 bad experiences in a row, so it was looking dire, and I didn't know what to do, so I was not feeling anything. And then I got approved for Husband Material by Alexis Hall. I didn't expect it at all. I was hoping that I might be approved. Husband Material by Alexis Hall was everything it had. And once again, as with most Alexis Hall's books that I've read so far, it was an extremely emotional experience for me. The sequel still follows Luke and Oliver, and in this book their relationship is technically in trouble. It was so interesting to see this trope explored with a queer couple. The story is called Husband Material because Luke and Oliver are at the stage of their life a bit later after the finale of the first book, where most of their friends are getting married. And they have to think if marriage is something that they want to do and how it's going to work for them, because we were outsiders for a long while and we were not growing up with the idea that this institution is available to us. So it was such an interesting idea for a novel. On the basic level, there's not much there. It's just a story about a couple that experiences some troubles and that is trying to figure out what's the next step in their relationship. But when you tell the same story to the queer lens, it's just different. This book gave me a quarter-life crisis. I managed to avoid it at 25, and I really had to sit and think what I want from my future. I'm not lying, this book literally shredded me apart. And then it was also so validating and so warm. This is something that Alexis Hall does very well. He's very good at exploring vulnerabilities of characters, and I think that's why I feel his romances so much. I sympathize with these characters because they are actually people. The conflict that Oliver and Luke have is something that could have been predicted in the first book. They're 2 very different people that come from 2 very different worlds. They complement each other, but when it comes to the point when they have to make choices, they're not willing to sacrifice their values because they're both are very stubborn. So Oliver sees marriage as a very traditional thing, and Luke doesn't really understand why Oliver feels so much kinship with straight people and why he sees weddings this way. He is more into non-traditional weddings or no weddings at all. So when this book comes out, I think it's August, I highly recommend to pick it up, especially if you loved the first part, obviously. I think the second one is less romantic and more down to earth in a way that is very refreshing. We don't get a lot of relationship in trouble, marriage in trouble romances, and in my opinion, we all very much need them. Although I wouldn't be willing to reread it soon because it made me spiral. I'm not kidding. Then I was like, okay, so it worked. I picked up a favorite author and I loved his book. I need to pick up a new release by another favorite author, and I picked up the audiobook of Extasia by Legrand. This book is so interesting. I gave it 3 stars, but I still think that it's so interesting. It's such an unique blend of genres. I also think the fact that it's young adult is very questionable because it's so violent. The story follows a girl named Amity who lives in a village post-apocalypse, which very much lives by the Handmaid's Tale rulebook. In her village, it's believed that women are from the devil, and they were the reason why the civilization collapsed. So every few years they choose 4 premenstrual girls that have to represent the sacrifice of their village and to absolve the sins of their mothers, as in the women that came prior. So what happens is they choose these girls and call them saints. It's a very prestigious position. So these 4 girls are considered to be saints, and every few months they are trapped with the villagers in a barn, basically. And these villagers are allowed to do whatever to these girls, and they are encouraged to do whatever to these girls, as in tell them about their deepest desires, about their sins, not rape them, although I feel like it's hinted at, but beat them up for sure, pinch them, spit on them, call them names, etc. The idea is they serve as a vessel between God and regular people. An important note, they also believe that they have to do it because men are rapidly dying in the village and no one understands why. But the deaths are horrible. It looks like they were tortured, etc., etc. The protagonist, Amity, really wanted to become a saint for a long while, and she's been training to become one because her mother was a traitor. People of the village caught her cheating on her husband, and they decided that she's in cahoots with the devil, that her sins cannot be absolved. Basically, she was punished for her crimes, and then they murdered her. Amity finally gets what she wanted, though she had to suffer her mother's sins. She becomes a saint, but the suspicious deaths are not ending, and she wants to figure out how can she help her village. 2 other saints, 2 other girls, tell her that they know something that she also needs to know, and they lead her outside of the village to a coven of witches. I've told you, the mix of genres is very interesting. So these women are actually witches. The leader of the witches, named Malice, tells Amity that Extasia, the power that they use, called for Amity. So Amity, still brainwashed, believes that if she's going to go with what Extasia wants from her, she might encounter the devil and she might fight him or do something about him, and that he will stop ravaging her village. This one was like a mix between The 100, The Handmaid's Tale, and some elements of classical fantasy. I think it was very successful. It's just I don't like these things mixed together, so that's why I had an issue with this book. I think the element that I enjoyed less out of all of them is the witch aspect. It kind of felt out of place in my opinion. I think other people will love this book more. It's very unique, very unusual, but I gave it 3 stars. To me, it felt a bit too weird and conceptual. I don't think I was very disappointed. I was mostly confused about my feelings. That's why I gave it 3 stars. And the last thing that I want to talk to you about is the Necessary Evils series by Onley James. It was so hyped on Booktube a few months ago, And I was talking to Diane, who's my Booktube and regular friend, and she told me that she read the first book, and I was like, do you want to read the second one together? But I need to read the first book first. I was kind of interested in the series, I'm not going to lie. Serial killer romances are kind of my thing. So I was very interested what this series is going to deliver. And I gotta say that these books are very entertaining and quick, but they do have quite a few flaws. The first book is called Unhinged, and it was definitely unhinged. It follows Adam and someone else, I don't remember the name, whatever. Adam is a part of his father's experiment. His father collected a bunch of psychopaths as children and raised them to be weapons. He raised them to be assassins and to kill bad people. I don't really want to explore the portrayal of psychopathy in this series because it's bonkers, it's very badly represented, in many ways is incorrect, whatever. This is a series of quite short romances. I didn't expect a lot of depth from them, and I didn't get much depth. Not surprised. The first book, as I said, follows Adam. Adam is a serial killer, an assassin. Adam is catching a guy that is stalking him for some reason and figures out why. It turns out that the guy is the son of a man that was his first kill and that he remembers him. This was a very interesting concept, except it's insta-love, which was extremely annoying to me. I think especially in this first book, it was not very believable. And it was not very enjoyable either. So Adam is immediately obsessed with the guy, he follows him around, he wants to bring him into the fold, which basically means into the family. And obviously the relationship is very smooth sailing. It's interesting that the other hero constantly thinks about how things are going way too fast, and then he doesn't stop or slow down or anything, which was weird because in a way the author was trying to tell us that she knows things are moving too fast, but she was also like, but I don't care and you shouldn't either, which was an interesting message, I gotta say. Some guy was doing work outside and I'm too introverted for him to see me, so I ran. I hope he goes lower and doesn't see me. I'm nervous. Can he hear me? So basically Adam tells his love interest that he doesn't remember the most important thing about his dad, which is that his dad was a pedophile and that he was one of his victims. When the truth comes to light, the love interest starts to remember things and they are terrible. And he also remembers that there were other men there, and Adam offers him his help. He wants to murder every single man that tortured him when he was a child, which is the plot for the book. It was not a bad plot. It's just the romance was very unconvincing to me. I think I gave this book 3 stars. I also think it's not as hot as people say it is. It's very rough sex porn transcript. At least it reads this way. Also, this book does this annoying thing where a love interest, which is an abuse survivor, wants to have sex to forget about the abuse. Then I read Psycho, which is the second book in the series with Diane, and I definitely liked it more, although it is even more implausible than the first book because one of the characters is psychic. So somehow the series is contemporary but also is a paranormal romance. We were jesting about this, wondering if she's going to introduce werewolves and vampires next and ghosts. The second book, Psycho, in my opinion, had better chemistry and the timing of the relationship was a bit better. Also, the big perk of the series, I think, is that it's funny. It has really funny dialogue. I also love dark humor, so it's very me. The sequel follows a guy named August. He's a serial killer, brother of Adam, and also a professor. He meets this other professor who has a very scandalous reputation because he worked for FBI before and was committed to an asylum and thrown out of the service. And when they bump into each other, August, for some reason, that's the implausible part, believes that the guy is a psychic and that's why he was thrown into the asylum. Basically what happened is the guy touched his colleague and saw that he's actually a serial killer and kills native women. And he told on him, but no one believed him because his only evidence was what he saw, and obviously no one believes in psychics, only August somehow. But the relationship was kind of cute. I liked it, and I liked their dialogue, and I thought it was better balanced than the first one. In this one, they're trying to catch this other dude, the FBI serial killer, and the plot was just better. It was just better. Also, warning for a very descriptive knife play scene, which was such a turn-off for me. I skipped it. I think the series is like popcorn. It's not especially heavy. You can eat a lot of it. It's quick. It's enjoyable in a way. That's why people are obsessed with it. But is it really, really good? Is it a book that I'm going to remember? I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think so. I don't even know if I'm going to continue. It was kind of fun to read with a friend, but otherwise, I don't know if I loved it. Although I gave the second book 4 stars because objectively it was better than the first one. So these are all the books that I wanted to talk about. By my shifted disposition, you can tell that the guy is still outside and is still working. I think he is installing a conditioner. And I am very anxious that he's going to see me filming, and it's dumb and I'm too introverted for this kind of thing. So I think I'm going to wrap it up quickly. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. The light changed, but I'm trying to work on filming in natural lighting because putting up actual lighting is a bit annoying. Thank you for watching once again. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon with another video. In the comments down below, leave an emoji of a heart in your favorite color and leave a book that you liked recently. I'll see you soon with another video, but until then,